Have you ever wondered how you could comprehend what someone is saying and give a response to them? How are we able to differentiate between jokes and sarcasm? The answer is, there are parts of the brain that are related to language functions. As agreed by linguists, there are right and left hemisphere of the brain. But the only one that is responsible for comprehending, sending signals, and generating speech is the left hemisphere. Those are Broca's area, Wernicke's area, motor cortex, and arcuate fasciculus. So in this video, we are going to explain conditions in those particular areas that resulted in errors and problems in speech production. My name is Nur Syakira from section 731, and I'll be explaining to you about Broca's aphasia. What is Broca's aphasia? Broca's aphasia is a disorder that occurs because of damage to a specific area of the brain, known as Broca's area. People diagnosed with Broca's aphasia often understand what others say, but they find it hard to speak fluently due to difficulty in producing words. This type of aphasia is also known as non-fluent aphasia or expressive aphasia. Now you might be asking, where is the Broca's area located? According to an article from Johns Hopkins Medicine, Broca's area is located in the frontal cortex above and behind the left eye, which is on the left hemisphere of the brain. As you can see here, the colored part is known as Broca's area. So what is the relationship between language and Broca's aphasia? As claimed by Paul Broca, a French surgeon, Broca's area is involved in speech production and articulation, where it converts the words in our mind into a spoken version of the words. That means damage to the area such as injury to the brain, stroke, or tumor will affect our ability to form a proper speech. Now, let's take a case study from the Aphasia Center as an example. Georgia, a woman aged 33 who suffered a stroke at a young age, has been diagnosed as a patient of severe Broca's aphasia. She could understand what her therapist was saying, but could only reply with, "I don't know," or just one word. But by the end of her program, she could already use 2 to 4 words at a time, such as, "Help me, please," and "I want Diet Coke." This explains that although Georgia has the images of what she's going to say, she cannot construct a proper speech because of her condition. Patients of Broca's aphasia were identified to only use lexical morphemes such as nouns and verbs while talking, and they often exclude the functional morphemes such as preposition and inflectional morphemes such as past tense or plural. This kind of speech is known as agrammatic speech. Thus, it clearly correlates with the theme where damages to speak areas on the left hemisphere will result in inability to produce spoken language, just like the cases of Broca's aphasia. Now, I'll be passing the presentation to Aina Najiha.
My name is Nur Najiha with metric number 223388. Will be presenting about my chosen concept, feral child. Feral child, also known as wild child, is a child who has very limited contact with humans while growing up, whether they are not nurtured in a human environment or being isolated and secluded from the community of humans, and in some cases, they also have been living with animals. As they grow up, they can be seen to not have the same habits as a normal human child. For example, feral child can be seen to walk on all fours instead of using their legs, and the most noticeable trait in them is the absence of language. Throughout history, many people question the behavior of these children, whether is it possible to lose their human traits just because they have limited contact with other humans, and it is possible for them to acquire language. As more researchers get into the cases of feral children, they found out the correlation between the behavior of a feral child and the development of the brain throughout their growth in a bizarre environment. The relationship between my concept and the theme language and brain is, as can be seen in these feral children, they did not acquire language. This phenomenon happened because of the environment they grew in and the limited interaction and communication they had with other human beings. This is related to what we call the critical period. According to a neuroscientist, Frank Sempil, a critical period is a time during early postnatal life when the development and maturation of functional properties of the brain is strongly dependent on experience or environmental influences. This means the environmental of a child is really effective on their brain development, including left of the brain which language is located. According to Josh Yule, it has been stated that the components in left side brain had been used in brain activity involved in hearing words, understanding it, and saying it. Based on this, we can say that the feral children cannot speak languages because there is very limited to no words were spoken to them in their critical period, so the brain cannot generate any words for them to speak. I've chosen this case as my real-world example. The wild boy who was found in France 1800 was called the Wild Boy of Aveyron. No one knew how he ended up in the woods, and his age is unknown, but people believe he was around 12 at the time. After years, he was put under the care of Jean-Gaspard Itard, who believed he can make the boy, or he named Victor, into a normal and civilized boy. When first was found, Victor was believed to be deaf because he was unresponsive to people's speech, but it was observed that Victor actually pays attention to natural sounds sounds, such as the cracking of walnuts or the bark of the dogs. This can be explained as Victor never heard human language and felt alienated by it, thus chose to not respond to the sound or speech conducted to him. Itard began work on Victor's speech, but it did not progress much even after 5 years. Victor could only articulate "oh Dieu," "oh God" in French, and "light milk." However, the sound that Victor made light is not meant to the milk, and he did not even know what is milk, but in fact, it was the sound he just randomly made when he was delighted. This also proves that Victor cannot speak human language even though he was proven not deaf or mute. According to George Yule, the study of language 7 edition, the critical period is where the human brain is most ready to receive input and learn particular language. However, for Victor who already passed this critical period, it seems to be impossible for his brain to acquire a language, or simply he did not try to learn the language at all. The scientists in their age also made a conclusion that maybe Victor is just an incurable idiot. Thus, the case of Victor of Aveyron proves how it was important for a child to interact and communicate with other language users to generate speech on their own. If a child is isolated and receives no interaction with humans, their left hemisphere of brain where language were located will not be developed. That is all for my concept. I will pass the presentation to my groupmate Fadillah that will talk about tongue slip.
Thank you, Aina and Najiha. Now I'm Nur Fadillah binti Muhammad Saufi. We'll be explaining about tongue slips. According to a study made by Iwal Mana, tongue slips occur when there is a contradiction between what speakers mean to say and what they actually say. Tongue slips, similar to those made by speakers with brain impairment but made by speakers without brain damage. It is possible for speakers to make an error or mistake when delivering speech in daily conversation. It may occur either intentionally or unintentionally. It is usually found in impromptu speech and eventually results in failure. Next, what is the relationship between language and the brain and tongue slips? Research has figured out that the parts of the brain that deal with language are in the left hemisphere. So it indicates that whenever we speak or communicate, we absolutely need our brain to process, understand, and generate and produce the language. When it comes to tongue slips, people often assume it as a speech error and think it has nothing to do with the brain, which is wrong. Why? So there we go. Our brain needs to play its role before the speakers utter something verbally. And if there is a mistake in speaker speeches, our brain is unquestionably involved. How? Usually, the brain organizes the sequence of words to make a perfect sentence by recalling the right term to use in conveying the message, and it is not impossible if the brain is not able to do so in some circumstances, like feeling nervous or emotionally affected during speech. This phenomenon is known as brain slips or slips of the brain. Hence, tongue slips can be defined as the result of having brain slips, which can cause errors in speeches.
So here few examples of tongue slips based on TV show that known as Tonight Show Indonesia. During the conversation, the speaker said, "Aduh, umur berapa ya itu aku? 9, 10, 10 apa ya?"
Based on the first example, the speaker made a mistake in her speech when she was talking about her age, known as perseveration. Perseveration happens when the initial sound of the word is carried over to the next word. As you guys heard, the speaker mispronounced 10 as 10, which is 10, due to initial sound. Sem from 9 is carried over to the next word 10. And in this case, 9, which is 9, is considered as the source of the error.
Now let's jump to the next example. In the conversation, the speaker said, menarik banget ya cari cucu. Cucu Om Acil.
For the second example, the type of speech error that the speaker had is anticipation. Anticipation is an error in which sound is used before the next word. In this case, when the speaker talks about the grandchild of Om Acil, which is Uncle Acil, instead of saying cucu, he said cucu, which he accidentally added le sound that comes from the word Acil, which is located after the word cucu, means grandchild in English. Due to his mispronunciation, he immediately corrected himself by saying the right word.
Last but not least is bilingualism. There are a lot of definitions for bilingualism. One of the early assumptions of bilingualism was native-like control of two languages by Bloomfield, an American linguist. Then bilingualism was pointed out as the familiarity of the second language by the user, or known as the ability to control two languages by Diebold, an American linguistic anthropologist. In his research, Diebold discovered that the implications of bilingualism may start with the learning of an alternate set of lexical items from the second language without the knowledge or any of the grammatical rules. Later on, he identified that a person's exposure to the surrounding and environment where more than one language is used is what ultimately influences the extent to which they pick up a second language. The general public is now aware that bilingualism refers to the fluency or usage of two languages. Now, the relationship. There are several discoveries that have been made regarding the details part of the brain that have a relation to the language function of humans. According to the research, the left hemisphere of the brain contains the language area of the brain. Most important part to process, produce, give, or even send signal concerning two languages are in the areas around the left ears. However, each specific part in the left brain that related to the language are for different functions. Evidence has accumulated for bilingualism showing that this common experience of bilingualism has a significant and systematic impact on cognitive function. The mental processes involved in understanding and acquiring language are referred to as cognitive processes. Thinking, knowing, and problem solving are only a few of the examples. Thus, this indicates that the ability to speak and understand two languages fluently requires the left side of the brain, particularly the cognitive area. In order to ease your understanding, a few examples of bilingual people who are based on widely recognized individuals are given. The first one is Jack Ma. He is the co-founder of the Alibaba Group, a Chinese technology company. As a native speaker of Mandarin, of course, he speaks it with ease. Nevertheless, due to his interest in the English language, he started to teach himself by communicate with foreigners when he was a kid. Because of that, now he can speak both English and Mandarin with ease. He is regarded as bilingual. The second one is Kobe Bryant. Kobe Bryant is a famous basketball player in the history. He is a bilingual. He moved to Italy after being raised in the United States of America. He then began to adapt and learn Italian in Italy because of the consequences of his new surrounding. As a result, he was able to communicate with his school friends and play soccer with them using Italian. That's a problem.